So hello, everyone. So it is a great honor to return Texas A&M. And actually, first time I was here in 2004, I had a job interview here. So I really like College Station. And every time when I see that, I see a lot more new faces, younger faces. And also the town changed. You haven't seen the town in 2004. So I actually witnessed, I feel like a College Station really sort of transformed. They became more suburban, more cultural, more restaurant. So this is great. And thank you, Remy, for the invitation. Remy is a very great, successful PhD student from UIUC. Xiaofeng is also my great colleague and my good friend. So I'm very happy to see Remy is doing well here. So today I'm going to talk about this called model agnostic graph neural network, and really for the neuroscience application. Okay, so this is my collaborators. The most work actually is done by Wenzhou Zhou, also received PhD from UIUC, but under supervision by Ruoqing Zhu. So he joined the UCI as a postdoc about a year and a half ago, and he's doing great. He's actually on the job market this year. So we have two neurobiologists. One's Nobel 14, and that data is from his lab. We actually collect the rats data from his lab, and his student Kayla Cooper is also excellent. And also Babashu Baba is a joint mentor for this Wenzhou for the postdoc program. So now, I would say among all the human beings' organs, the brain is the most complex and challenging. Even yourself, you don't understand your brain very well, right? Just think about every day you get up, you have a lot of thoughts in your mind. You think about what you're going to do, right? This is what you call this kind of a temporal organization. You start to say, I'm going to have maybe have a coffee first, brush your teeth, and then have to meet this person and do a research, right? So actually, for this research, we really try to understand the mechanism, how the brain really functions for certain behavior, especially related to the memory. Okay, so we noticed that the co-activation of the regions of the brain is very important to play this role. So brain is not just like a separate, like this region doing separate things, a lot of co-activation. Okay, so overall, let's say. This is the experiment. This is the experiment that we use the rats as experiment. Everyone knows that rats is a very strong sense of a smell. The nose is super good. I will tell you why, because I'm growing some passion fruit figs in my yard, right? And the California rats just so aggressive. And I see a lot of my fruits are gone. So of course, we're going to trap the rats, right? And my husband said, I'm going to use a trap. With some food to entice the rats. So we bought the organic fruit from Whole Foods, right? Because the rats like to eat fruits. We put organic fruits from the market, put out the trap. Turned out the rat's not interesting. That's just interesting in my fruit. And if I put my passion fruit there, you can. I said, wow, how these rats can tell this is a fruit from the market, not from my yard, right? So now you understand, even say it's organic, maybe it's not really ripe naturally. It's just the rat's not that interested. So the experiment is doing that. We have 5 different odors, A, B, C, D, E. So the 5 different odors have distinct smell. And so they train the rats understand the sequence, okay? They train the rats, they want to release the odor, it's A, B, C, D, E. So this called this, let me look at this one. So this is kind of experiment, what you do, it's a very short video. Okay, so basically when you see that, this is experiment, right? We're doing this called in sequence order, A, B, C, D. So if they sense this is follow the right order, they have this nose poke response, just like still stick with the most polar response. They don't move. But once, let's say this out of sequence, if you put the A, B, D, D, E, this out of sequence, the rats, when you train the rats, they recognize it's not in sequence order. So you have to train their memory. So once they say, oh, it should be C, but how come it's D? Of course, in their mind, they don't think of C and D. Then they will, if they do correctly, they will pull out. They say, it's not the right smell, I'm pulling out. So either way, if they do correctly for this in sequence, they have the nose pulled, or in another experiment, then pull out, they receive a reward, which is the water. Okay, rats cannot live without water. Water is very important for them. And also, if they did it correctly for out of sequence, they recognize this spot. This is the not correct order. They pull out, so they did it correctly. So in that sense, if they in the correct in sequence, they pull out in the middle, they perform incorrectly. And if it's out of sequence, they still stick their nose pole in the end, they perform incorrectly. So either way, you can measure their behavior, whether they perform correctly or incorrectly. In the meantime, we also, you see that we also measure their neural activity. This neural activity, we record this on the top of their brain. They put this kind of planted electric electrodes in this hippocampal area, so measure their brain activity. Like we talk about spike, brain spike, they measure this. So we try to connect whether you measure the brain activity can associate with their performance. Right, so this is kind of cool. This is a quantitative measure, and that's their behavior. You see if there's any connection. Let's say if you're using this quantitative measure, I can predict the well. They will do correctly or incorrectly. Then sort of as a really important step to understand the brain mechanism. The neuroscience scientists are very, very interested. Okay, so this overall experiment, what we do, and we try to make a connection between the behavior and the neuronal activity. Okay, so this is a kind of a signal that spike. You have a principal neurons. You collect look like this. And this LFP, local field potential, you collect this look like a wave, like a brain wave. So you never recorded in called the CA1 region because this was really related to the memory and especially let's say temporal memory related to the episodic memory. Like when you get up, you think about what things you need to do first. The sequential memory, not just one memory. Okay. So this is filtered and for like this kind of oscillation for this kind of unit, okay? So we try to connect this, it's about naturally connect this more like a graph structure. Okay, think about each neurons, which you plant this electric tetrodes is your nodes. And your feature, node feature, okay, your node feature is your temporal local field potentials, right? We collect all this neural activity, this is your node feature. And we also can measure the edges, the connection between two nodes. You can use a marginal correlation. You could also use a precision matrix. This is kind of pretty standard. You can measure whether they're connected or not connected. And the outcome is associated with their behavior. So this is only like a binary outcome variable, either whether they did it correctly in sequence or out of sequence, and this is a binary outcome. And if you have this repeated trial, because you do many, many times, you could have any graph instance. So this is kind of set up connecting with this experiment. Okay. So these days, we all know that deep learning is really everywhere, right? So you can also, of course, using this data, you can use a Bayesian model, graphic model, network data, other approaches. But naturally, because there are so many unobserved information for this kind of data, we try to learn what's going on. Let's say what's the latent representation to reflect this data you collected, okay? So the deep learning is very powerful for presentation learning. Let's say if you have a speech like a ChatGPT using transformer, And if you have image data, most recently, they're not just using convolution neural network, they call the diffusion model. But in the graph or network data, what kind of tools they use for the deep learning, using the deep learning tools. And this actually comes a new one called graph neural network, GNN. Now, this actually was introduced in 2009, but then later on, it's a much more development using graph convolution network and attention base, and also isomorphism, this kind of a network. Okay, actually, I teach a short course for deep learning. So I feel it's so I do teach a short course, and also in our machine learning course, I teach deep learning. So I feel students are really interested in this field. But you actually notice that for the ICLR conference, you look at the keywords, most popular keywords. The first one is a reinforcement learning. The second one is a deep learning. And third one is a GNN. Okay, you can see that the later ones are representation learning. Federated learning is laid down, transfer learning, something meta learning. So you can see that GNN is a top 3 keywords in this kind of conference. So let's come back and give you the basic introduction. What's a GNN doing? Graphic neural network. They try to integrate the neighboring order information. So you look at these nodes, right? So you have because overall the deep learning idea is a hierarchical learning. You have a first layer, second layer. So how this connected with a graphic model. You have, let's say, B and C are the adjacent nodes for your A, and B and C, so therefore we call the first order related to the nodes A. And the B, you know that D is a second order neighbor of A because it have to go through C and arrive A, so it's a second order node. You can see that this is a kind of a, if you're doing spatial, you see it's a wave, right? You have an adjacent neighbor, the next adjacent neighbor. And the key tools, they're using what called the message parsing. And message parsing is really try to do information aggregation from the closest neighbor. So they first learn the embedded is just like a latent information. They learn the latent information for nodes B and C. They update the B and C. Then pass that information to the node A. This is called first round message parsing. And for second round message parsing, they updated latent information for D. Then through the D, you also update the C, then passing to the A. So this is a kind of a central piece for the GNN. Yeah, sure.
Is it order dependent?
No, definitely.
When do you start, right?
Yeah, it's definitely all dependent.
Order dependent.
The order.
Where do you start first node and then update the neighbors?
Right.
Does it order dependent?
Yeah, order definitely dependent. This is what we'll talk about. Okay. So in biological motivation, that's very useful because why we care about the low order and high order information, right? So let's think about the low order. It really try to capture the local knowledge. For example, when the neuron finding is a specific function region, we know there are different regions. Hippocampus, more like a thinking, analytical scale, and some regions for your spatial, for your balance, some is for emotion, some is for the language. It's all different regions, right? So for each specific region, you try to really specialize, let's say, cognitive function, memory formation. You start to look at things, memorize. This is kind of more like a low order, do the low order neighborhood information. But we also have high order in the sense that the two different regions could also co-activate with each other. So, for example, here you know order will formulate memory. For the high order, you could have a memory transfer. Okay, so let's think about the autism kid. There's something not doing that well for high order information. They see what they see. Okay, they remember the number, remember the words, but they cannot make a connection. So the connection and memory transfer is occur in all this region co-activation, the high order. Okay, so makes sense that the graphic neural network could be very, very useful, this kind of tool for this kind of a biological setting. But however, the current GNN has a serious limitation for this kind of application. We call them memory lists. The memory is because every time you do the layer, you do the first layer, you do nonlinear transformation, you do graph Laplacian, then you do the next one. Remember, everything in deep neural network is doing many composition, the function composition to the other composition, one layer after the other layer. So it's like a time series model. Eventually, you overwrite. So the deep layer, the high order information tends to wash out the representation information learned in the early layer, which capture the low order information. So in this kind of sense, we actually fail to integrate both low order and high order information. Really just focus on the last layer. You do the good prediction, but you really early on information is lost. So this is a problem, okay? So here's what we're going to try to achieve. So this model we call magnet. We try to achieve two things. We want to get more accurate estimation and integrate through this integration, low order and high order. We want to utilize both information. We want to more accurate estimation, prediction. This is a very, usually deep learning is good at it, okay? The second thing is about interpretation, because we talk about the AI things, right? How this deep learning has interpretation, because interpretable models are really missing in deep learning. They're doing many hierarchical composition, where really what's going on, which node is important, which feature is important, they're lost. You cannot figure it out. So we also try to develop, identify inferential structure of this estimation model, so we can identify which nodes, which feature, which edge are important. Okay, so this is some roadmap for the estimation part, the first part. First part, we want to get a full representation, not just get the highest level, deep layer representation. We want to have both, every layer. We want to get the information. We want to keep it, preserve this information. The second one is evaluation. That not just get each layer, we want to understand the quality in this important layer. How many weights we should put there, okay, evaluation. And the last step is easy, fusion. That means you get all layers, you want to optimally combine them. So they aggregate all this layer. So the first one, the actor, here what we call this, they actually in deep learning they use a lot of fancy words, okay? They call this actor, okay? Each layer, they call single weak learner, and we have the name actor network. So let's say each layer has very unique order information, that you have a unique representation. We talk about the memory information, that's important, we want to keep it that way. And high level maybe memory transformation is also important. So here we not just try to wash out the low order layer, we want to preserve it. We keep it Z1, Z2 all the way, hierarchical way, all the high order layer. You retain this Z information. All the Z is like the latent information you learn. And second step, you try to figure out what is the weights or what is the quality for each layer. And this, when we try to learn the quality, we need to use a separate deep neural, let's say feed-forward neural network. And we perform this separate critical network, try to figure out what is the alpha, which is the weights, the representation quality. Okay, you can use another feed-forward neural network to figure out what is your each alpha. Now, this alpha as a quality is it makes sense that if you have a high classification error, if this layer leads to high classification error, misclassification error, you will put less quality, right? So the alpha is associated with epsilon, which is a misclassification error. And misclassification error is calculated this way. This SI is labeled, and F is a predictor one. If it's a mismatch, it's a misclassification, but also weighted by the beta, some weights. And the beta is actually try to take the heterogeneity among graph instance into consideration, in the sense that you don't just want stuck with a sample, always the same sample over and over. You also want to put more weights on the graph samples which are not sufficiently represented. So it's like a MCMC, right? You don't just stuck with one local chain. You want to keep the possibility to move around. So this weights beta also take a heterogeneity into account. So using this calculation. So once you calculate this alpha, which is a kind of importance for each layer, the third step is fusion, that you do the linear combination. You have all this Z1 all the way to ZL, and the alpha K is each layer's weights, the quality. You do the weighted combination. So that part is easy to understand. So try to understand how this is different from a GNN, the existing GNN. So why here fusion is a successful strategy, okay? So in GNN, they really rely on called self-connection for enhancing message passing. What they're doing that, they kind of aggregated neighbors by adding identity matrix I to the adjacent matrix A with a L is a power function, just L power, right? So you have many layers, you keep multiply itself, the adjacent matrix plus the identity matrix, and keep doing that. That's also problems that you will lose the early information. But here, what we're doing here is like, we're not doing multiplication. In fact, we're doing addition. And actually, you can see for any power function, if you can expand it, you can make an addition term. That's what our approach. And we actually sort of achieve the equivalence effect, but in the meantime, you have more power to determine which layer you should keep it, or you're not just like wash out by using this multiplication, okay? So this is the advantage. By doing addition instead of doing multiplication, you're able to preserve every layer information. So this kind of a general idea here. So this is summarized. First, you get every weak active network. You preserve this and find their quality and do the fusion. So this is what we achieve for the estimation part. Let's do a quick numerical check, right? What can we gain by doing this? What can we get representation power? So this is a very small experiment. It's just an experiment. We compare this two most cutting edge graphic neural network. One's attention-based, one's a convolution network. So the orange one is attention, the green one is a convolution, the blue one is our work. You see when the number of layer goes up, right? Our testing accuracy keep going up. But on the other hand, the attention-based and convolution one, they kind of peak around the L equal to 4, then comes down. You see, actually, they do suffer the memories problem. When you have high number of layers, they're not that powerful. But we still, because of this, we are able to integrate both low and high order information, we can continue goes up for the accuracy, even the L increases. Okay, so this is just a quick illustration showing that what's our gain. Any questions so far? So I'm going to talk about second part, interpretation part. This is more related to our statistic thinking. I would say first one is more like this computer science, deep learning, machine learning, not really machine learning, it's a data science, computer science, engineering thinking, right? The prediction estimation. The second part, I would think about more like related to statistic thinking. We always not just say get the results. We also need to know the why. The why is important. When we do, especially our medical data, we tell the doctor, say, follow this model, I give you the best result. The doctor will always ask you, say, why, right? We ask which feature will contribute the most for the prediction. If you cannot answer this question, the doctor cannot just assign this treatment to the patient. Right? Patient also will ask why. So that's why in our medical data, just to perform well in prediction, accuracy, estimation, efficiency, it's not enough, right? So here, the important question we also need to answer is how can we identify important nodes related to, let's say, important neuronal region, which region is active? And informative edges, which connection between important nodes are informative? And also identify inferential dimension of null feature. Remember, we have a high dimension null feature from this neuronal activity. You see the neural firing, you collect all this information. So this is a graph information that some edges may be not important and not needed, and some nodes you need to delete it, and some dimension of the feature you also don't need it. Okay, you can see that. So it's like model selection, right? When we do model selection, we're doing this. So here's the idea. The idea is to try to reduce uncertainty. So let's say it's more like from information theory. Of course, information theory is always related to the likelihood. So it's kind of like if I use the subgraph, you can think about all this. The second one is a subgraph, right? Whether this subgraph is sufficient to represent my data. If the subgraph represents well, then what you can see that you will have information gain, in some sense that you have a reduction of uncertainty, right? So this is the information gains defined as the delta is a Shannon entropy. So if you're not familiar with it, it's like a cross entropy for tail divergence, the cross entropy. So the information gain is a Shannon entropy for the full model, let's say your learned estimation model, and then the Shannon entropy is a cross entropy between the full model and the subgraph. So everyone, we should know that if my graph represents my information really well, then the cross entropy, also the Shannon entropy between the full model and the subgraph should be very small, right? Because they represent similar likelihood. So the difference between these two likelihoods is very, very small. So this is the equivalent to minimize this cross entropy, this one, okay? You want to maximize the information gain, I skipped that. So it's equivalent to minimize this cross entropy. Okay. So, but however, when we do this subgraph model, it's very different from model selection. Model selection is relatively easier. I select this variable or not select this variable. But here you think about, we have many nodes, many edges. It's a kind of a doing combinatorial exercise. What is the best combination? So eventually come out, it's actually NP-hard problem because you're dealing with exponential number of subgraph candidates, right? So if you just do this, it's really infeasible or unscalable. So here, we try to simplify. So here we assume the subgraph is from the Gilbert random graph class, which says that the whole joint likelihood can be decomposed like each piece is a likelihood, and you can assume some independency and multiply them together. And EIJ, because the edges, right, is a follow Bernoulli distribution. Right. So the objective function will look like this. You basically try to figure out what is your mean, and so therefore what is your subgraph. But again, this is also challenging because the binary sampling, you're really dealing with the discrete nature of a subgraph. It's not continuous. And so make the optimization is statistically, whenever you do optimization, if it's a discrete, of course, you can do integer programming, all this, but it's a lot more harder and could be unscalable. And we're dealing with non-smooth optimization. So here they try to get this smooth version or continuous version for the previous version. They call the Gumbo softmax. So originally it's a binary one. You make it more like a logistic type of probability. So this E tilde is a sigmoid. Sigmoid basically just a logistic type of probability with this kind of parameters. Your omega is your temperature parameter, and we'll talk a little bit later what's a temperature parameter. And epsilon is a kind of a noise. So whenever you do the random sample in the continuous version, you introduce this noise, epsilon, which is from uniform. So you kind of you add some noise. And psi is basically the real value parameter associated with this mu. Okay, you have this kind of model. So eventually, so we transform to the NP-hard problem to the binary, random sampling, which is easy to handle, but you kind of do a further revision, make it a smooth version, you minimize this objective function. And turn out if the temperature parameter omega goes to 0, then this continuous version is converge, approximately consistent to the non-smooth version. Okay, so the binary version. So this is the kind of general, this is more like implementation. You make it easy to implement. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about theoretical results. Let me look at the time. Okay, that's still okay. Did I start 11?
11:30.
11:30. Oh, okay.
About 20 minutes.
Okay, now still have enough time. So in theory, we study several issues. One's efficacy, one's complexity, one's generalization. What does that mean, efficacy? Remember, we're using all this kind of graph neural network. It's more like using all the deep learning. The foundation is a try to learn the latent information, latent representation. So in statistics, like we doing the PCA, right? The simple linear representation using PCA. But in deep learning, they're using more nonlinear type of PCA. You can think about nonlinear through many hierarchical information. So when we do this latent representation, we need to ask ourselves, do we represent this graphic model, graphic information really well, right? So in what sense? Can we capture the feature among all the neighbors? Can we learn the various order information for this graph information, right? So efficacy. Second one is the complexity, because when we, let's say, we want to use a function space to cover this, to understand this random data, and this usually using the red metric complexity. So if you're using red metric complexity, so usually try to figure out what is the low bound, what is the upper bound. You basically try to cover up your data. If your red metric complexity, low bound, upper bound are very loose, it's not very useful. So can we get a tight upper bound? Low bound, usually we have the low bound. There's a tight upper bound that in a sense that can we achieve min-max optimal? Okay, the second one. The third one, because this red metric complexity is also useful to figure out the generalization error. So your prediction compared to your observed, the difference of generalization error. So what is the major components for the generalization error? Okay. So the first one, the efficacy, saying that our model actually is capable to learn this k-order neighborhood information. So this delta k we define this way. So you can think about like a graphic model. It's in some sense like unstructured data, right? You have the nodes, feature, and edges. But this way is like we try to map this kind of unstructured data to this representation data, which is a label space. We kind of map, right? You map. You have each order, you have a mapping function. You have this Laplacian operation L, X, you have each order. And the mean is just your sort of your weights, your mapping feature. So you have a k different order for the graphic information. So we can use this label space to fully represent this graphic information. So this is pretty much that, saying that we can learn well. And this is a one-to-one mapping function G. And through the Laplacian transformation, we can map the graphic information to the latent information. So this is the first one, the efficacy that, in many language models, it's also unstructured data. It's very difficult to understand using traditional way of thinking. But let's say I'm going to represent this unstructured data, messy data in a latent representation in the latent space. I still can capture the essential information from the raw data, but I can do it much neater way, in quantitative way, instead of unstructured way. Because there's no way you can do unstructured data. If you can transform the unstructured data to be structured information. Structure means you have rows and columns, everything is that you can input in the computer, right? The unstructured data, you cannot really input the computer, so you cannot do the data analysis. So this theory saying that for all this messy unstructured data, I can using label representation and reflect the different order of the information, the K order. So this is pretty much the first theorem saying that. The second one, we talk about this functional complexity. So the red metric complexity try to quantify the capacity of a set function. You have a bunch of set function in terms of ability to fit the random data, right? So I was just thinking about so in traditional statistics, I mean, we always familiar with uncertainty. How we understand the uncertainty, try to use a random variable. Now, these days, deep learning, it's actually, you think about it, it's a very deterministic way, right? It's a really deterministic way. The whole thing, we don't need a random variable. We don't need a lot of parametric or non-parametric. It's like using a very fancy function, very complex function, using complex functions through this hierarchical feature composition to reflect the true data. So you see that we sort of go really different way from stochastic or random situation move to more deterministic way. But when we talk about this in a sense of deterministic using like mathematical tools, functional complexity, we try to understand whether this function is complex enough or sufficient enough to fit, to cover all this random data. And this using the definition of the red metric complexity. So it's like this, okay? We have a many class of function. Absolute is a family of red metric variables. And you have this linear combination of this, and then you're able to recover your random data. So here's the theorem that our empirical red metric complexity upper bound is minimax optimal in a sense that it is tight. The upper bound is proportional to the low bound. That means upper bound and low bound, they're in the same order. So suppose your low bound and upper bound, they're in different order, it's not very good. Your upper bound could be too loose. So this shows you that what is our upper bound look like, what is our low bound look like, and that is actually up to some constant. So therefore, is able to achieve minimax optimal. Okay, so this is the second theory. The third one is a generalization ability. So this shows you the generalization error can be decomposed three parts. One is the meta estimation bias, one is intrinsic uncertainty, and third one is the local complexity. Now, we try to understand this, let's say, if we're non-parametric studies, how we understand these three parts. Intrinsic uncertainty, we know the random variable, right, has this uncertainty that measurement itself or the data collected intrinsic, that we understand. The local complexity, you can think about for non-parametric function, how this local function behave look like. You could have a lot of variability. You could have very smooth, right, not much variability. That shows the local complexity. For the meta one, it's like a global estimation bias. So in general, all this generalization error can be decomposed like meta one, estimation bias, the intrinsic one, and the local one, because the function is non-smooth and nonlinear. So you can have this kind of generalization error decomposition. Okay, so this is something again I want to actually when I teach a deep learning course, I find it's very interesting. So we always talk about bias and variance trade-off, right? What's going on, right? We're using a lot of parameters. We're going to hurt our, if the overfit, we're going to have a high variance. This is because statistical thinking always that when we think about the local one around this local region, even if we have a large sample size, but the local information is very limited, right? The neighborhood information is very, very limited. That's a problem. When you do this kind of a traditional thinking, when your parameters increases, your local sample size drastically decreasing. So that's why we were right into this variance and bias trade-off. But this is separate issue. But in this deep learning, actually, you have the other phenomenon called double descenting that actually you don't have this. Okay, you sort of this variance and bias trade-off somehow really doesn't appear for this kind of deep learning representation tools. But I kind of just give you the idea. I'm not giving you the details, but here's let's say the error comes from. So I'm going to talk about numerical study, first about simulation. This is the first one. When we investigate simulation, we need to say what is our prediction power or estimation accuracy. We also want to see what is our interpretation part, the recovery rate of importance nodes and recovery rate for non-redundant edges and inferential dimension of features. So the settings like this, you choose number of nodes, number of important nodes, what the feature generated from, and what's the edge generation. Okay, so first one, let's look at a classification task. So we compare, we talk about the convolution graph, convolution network, GCN, and attention network, and isomorphism. This three is the most competitive one. We also compare, just say use deep nets, not using fancy graphic one, deep nets. And also machine learning, let's say random forest. Let's say random forest, even if you don't know the neural network, can you do random forest? Or even logistic regression, okay, do all this. And you clearly see that logistic regression, of course, the most easiest one to handle. It's a worst performance. Random forest is better than logistic regression. In some sense, very similar to deep nets. You see that, or some situations worse. But the GCN, GAT, GIN overall perform better than deep nets, but compared to our method, it's still lower performance for accuracy. Okay, see this one? And the second one about the interpretation about can we recover the important nodes. So this is, and I noticed that the previous method, there's no way to do this task because all for the prediction estimation, in this deep learning representation, they didn't teach us how to identify important nodes. So no interpretation. So we can only compare the, let's say, group lasso, the model selection method, and integrated gradient method. It's also help you to figure out what are the important nodes. So we can only compare these two methods, not the GCN, GAN, this kind of method. And clearly, again, showing that for different settings, we outperform the other two methods. Right? It's actually significantly better. And then also look at the inferential edge identification that we can also only compare group lasso and integrate. This inferential edge identification using two criteria. So one called absolute metric, AM. It's kind of a ratio between the number of remaining redundant edges after reviewing and the theoretical possible redundant edges. So of course, redundant edges smaller is better, right? Low is better for this AM measure. The other one called RM measure, relative metric. This is a reduction of the number of redundant relative to existing redundant edges. So high is a better reduction. So those criteria that we show that low is lower, high is higher compared to other methods. Okay. And the third is a feature interpretation task. So we have certain feature that just in the middle of the feature is useful. You have like 20 features, early feature, later feature not useful, it's a low relevance. And you see that we are able to identify this informative features for two settings, one's in the middle, one's early features. So although the template is actually not that useful, it's just show the idea that we are able to identify important features. And the one not important with a low probability, low important score in this graph. So finally, we're going to talk about the application to this rats data. Kind of refresh memory, they put this signal, this electric tetrodes on their brain. So in that sense, it's also a very invasive study. They can do on the rats, they cannot do on the human. But we hopefully the knowledge can transfer. The knowledge we learn from the rats, hopefully also applicable, maybe partial applicable to the human as well. Okay. So the first aim is a machine learning criteria. We try to capture the complex relationship. Remember, we measure the signal. We also observe the behavior. Do we find the connection? Can we just using the signal to predict their behavior? If we can predict, the accuracy is very high. That's a big scientific advantage, right? Later on, we say, oh, we measure something, your brain wave like this. I can predict that this time you really you can concentrate well, because especially let's say for ADHD kids, they really don't know whether they can focus or not. So this is useful. Remember, we have in-sequence, out-sequence outcome, right? Measure about the older sequence for each rat. So for this study, we really just only have 5 rats, okay, do each rat individually. The second one is neurobiological criteria. We try to have the interpretation. We were able to identify which region is really active during this experiment, and also say which co-activation exists among these regions, and also want to identify, pay attention time, in what time window the rats really focus, because they have very strong motivation, they want to get reward, okay? So this is the 5 rats with all that have a name. The super Chris, because this rat is a super smart, okay? Why call Chris? I don't know. My husband's name is Chris, but this has nothing to do with my husband's name. They did experiment a lot earlier than I got involved. But there are 2 president candidates named Buchanan, Mitt. You can, maybe someone too young, you don't know Pat Buchanan, Mitt Romney. This, I think they picked this name, Barrett, Stella, I have no idea they picked. So the 5 rats, they do this checking the results. The red one is our performance for the accuracy percentage, high is better. The pink one is penalized logistic, perform the worst, not surprising, because the really easiest one to do a penalized logistic, you can do it. Random forest actually doesn't do that bad. Okay, and deep nets, the brown one is slightly worse than GCA, GAT, GIM. These 3 are very competitive, okay? But almost unanimously, all these 5 rats we're doing better. Some is much better, Stella's much better, MIT is slightly better than the other 3 methods. This is for estimation accuracy, means we can predict it better. Just based on the neuronal activity, you can predict the outcome better using the test data. The second one is about interpretable model. Remember using the subgraph model, using this kind of information theory to figure out which regions are important. This 5 graph, 5 figures is 5 rats. Another thing I want to say, we work with a neurobiologist. I feel they're doing visualization figures is a totally different level from statistician. You can see all these figures are drawn by the neurologist, not by us, right? So you can see this shape look like a brain, and they show the distal area. So this is the all your hippocampal area. You have a proximal area, you have a distal area. Distal area is a lot more active, a lot more node connection, and proximal area is very sparse connection. You see that? But has an interpretation, because the distal area is you see in one hippocampal area, it really involves the episodic memory. Episodic means a temporal related episodic. You remember doing the sequence memory, not just do one memory, it's an episodic memory. This also finding actually by just a pure like scientific research, they found the neuronal finding for the temporal event task is really in distal area. Okay, so they have other research, they confirm that. So the proximate area is really for spatial memory. So if your wife don't have a good direction like me, my husband also have a poor direction in the space, like I always went to the wrong place. It's related to the proximate area. So it's related to spatial memory. Notice for this task, there's no spatial task related. The other experiment, the rats also doing the maze. They need to figure out which, but this is another experiment. For this one, it's really just the sequential memory. Okay. Another thing is about co-activation. So you see that this distal area actually have a 3 region. One is SPSRSO with all this name. So they see that strong co-activation on this called trisynaptic circuit, tri means 3, okay? This kind of circuit also discovered by the other literature in neuroscience literature. So we are able to figure out to recover this co-activation across this multiple region because remember we are able to integrate this high order information well. Low order, high order, right? So this also the distal area with the 3 subregion, they co-activate. This is the last one, the interpretation, the pay attention time. Okay, now this figure is actually it's a little bit hard for us to understand, but you see, this is the time. The arrows means the beginning and goes up. You can see that. Okay, that's what I'm saying. We're really good at the visualization. For us, we cannot think about how can illustrate this information figure. So the top graph that Windsor draw this top graph, that's where statistician will draw this kind of graph. So pay attention time here that we show that during this 185 to 320 milliseconds, they really have a high concentration. Okay, and during that time, the importance score is very, very high. And beginning 0 to 50 seconds, very weak attention because that time no order release yet. There's no task. They just get ready, but they're not really pay much attention. Even between 50 and 150 milliseconds, also weak attention, not just to this LEC region, but also MEC region, because there's no spatial memory. Okay, MEC region is a spatial, it's a lack of activation of the MEC neuron along with a non-spatial task expectation. Okay, so this is quite interesting that you just think about it, it's very quick, they release the order. It's not like they let you smell for 1 minute. It's a really very short experiment. It's every milliseconds they smell, they make a judgment, whether they stay there or move away, and so they have to be really concentrate, okay, concentrate really well. So this is my last slide. So today I talk about the kind of a new GNN. We try to uncover the complex neuronal function. So we are motivated by this data. So we developed this new method. The key idea is that we try to effectively integrate the low order, which is local information, and the high order simultaneously, not just only focus on the global information, high order, neglect the low order. Okay, the key message. And also, I think beyond the estimation prediction, we're able to get a good interpretable model to identify inferential nodes, edge, and the node feature for prediction. Okay, so this part is also important. And when some extension, we haven't worked on this longitudinal or dynamic setting. Let's say the node feature or edge structure could change over time. This is actually more challenging. Think about network, dynamic network is more difficult. Your membership, your connection could change over time. You could have the addition and deletion of nodes or edges over the time. So this could be future work. If anyone interested, could also think about this direction as well. So thank you for your attention. And yeah.
Any additional questions?
Yeah.
How does this framework compare or relate to just doing like a skip connection?
Compared to what? I didn't hear that.
A skip connection where you just connect the latent layers to the output.
Oh, you mean compared to, let's say, just focus on the high order? Is that what you're saying?
No, so each layer is connected. Propagation composition, you also skip it to the output.
It's existed a little noise. I couldn't hear very well. So, yeah, this kind of the extra noise. How you say skip the composition? I try to understand your question.
So you have two sets of arrows. So one, you're propagating the layers, and you also connect each layer to. So all the layers are connected.
So it's done in Resnight?
I don't know.
So, okay, I maybe just rephrase what we're doing that, we have each layer information. And we also, we do the fusion by incorporate all the layer, but adding the weights. So we didn't skip any layer. Did I understand your question? I said probably misunderstand. Yeah. Yeah, okay, maybe talk about later. Yeah, still didn't quite understand your question. Any other question? Yeah, okay.
So probably I missed that part. So to find the initial structure, you run some kind of graphical model or something, get the structure, and then on top of it, run your model.
Yeah, you don't need to do that. You basically think maybe you need a warm start or maybe some idea what this graphic structure look like. So I didn't talk about how you input the data information, like for all the nodes and feature. You kind of let's see if I have this in the slides afterwards. Yeah, so this gives you data pre-processing. So you kind of have a template data. You have all this layer. You through this, you can read this. You can through this pre-processing, you can make this representation. So in a sense, actually, someone asked me a question: how to really transform the original data to this more like structured data. So this slides, I show you how to do it. Okay. So so what we do is we select randomly 200 graph samples for training, and the rest of the graph for sample and testing. Okay. And node feature filtering. So we filter out noise from the raw node feature and capture its temporal pattern, right? So edge construction. So this is a kind of like the original look like this. You make it unstructured data to be the temporal structured data. Then you can, using this raw data, then the DNA in general can give you the layer. You don't need to, let's say, what's the price structure look like. So this is something different. Let's say traditionally think about, maybe I need some prior information. What's the data, the graphic structure data look like.
So then this information gets updated. I mean, the
Yeah,
structure gets updated.
Yeah, exactly. You keep updating it until convergence and you get the output. Yeah.
Let's take one more. Maybe.
Yeah.
This is related also to the previous question. We start with unstructured data, somehow bring latent variables to create some kind of structure. Or in the traditional statistics, is it something like going from fixed effect model to random effect, or there are different?
Yeah, I think you made a very good connection. We always think about exactly. So, okay, this is also, I'm thinking all the time how the connection between this deep learning and what we traditionally learn about random effects, fixed effects model. So just think about when we use a random effects model, because we admit there's a heterogeneity, there's a noise which is not captured by the fixed effects. In statistics, the random effects usually follow certain distribution. Let's say Gaussian is very common, right? So in that sense, the random effects model, you really still, let's say if it's a normal distribution, still just involve few parameters. But here that what the deep learning representation thinking, they treat everything as a parameter. They're not a random variable. So in our thinking, random effects is a random variable, follow certain distribution. They are just the parameters. It's a high dimensional, so each individual has a parameters, sets of parameters. What are they going to do? They estimate it. They do it hard way, ugly way, they're going to estimate. And in our own thinking, we think it's impossible, right? We think it's a Neyman-Pearson problem, right? We know that you run our parameters, you're going to get biased, you're not going to get a consistent result. They're not worried about this. They just say, I'm going to throw all these parameters. I'm using the hierarchical nature, I estimated. And it turned out they do. And as long as they have a good training sample size, I mean, training samples, there are a lot. They don't run into the Neyman-Pearson. This is actually very interesting, but I don't have time to talk about here. But I was thinking, keep thinking like, it's quite a fascinating. But I want to say, it's not really everything's a magic there if they don't have enough training sample. And if the data is highly heterogeneity, and especially if the testing data and training data are very different, they still cannot learn. The only thing they can learn, they have a large training data. Just think about your language model, your ChatGPT. If you ask a simple question, what kind of cats I should adopt? The answer is great, right? Because probably many people ask this type of question. Many people input the text. They have a lot of, but if you ask some more challenging questions, specific, actually my friend Aurora DeLego said, I just asked ChatGPT, give me our coding to use the B-spline to get a density estimation using B-spline. And what ChatGPT gave it to you, it's all garbage and look like correct, right? It has a title, but what they're doing is just a B-spline regression, but they didn't really get the B-spline density estimation. I was saying that just that they really need a lot of sample in order to do well. So therefore, the statistical advantage is that even we have a relatively small sample, because we allow the random variable, we kind of have some parametric model assumption. So therefore, we can kind of overcome that, right? We also have an interpretation part. So try to understand both pros and cons. So here the idea is that because the nature of the data is just so complex, we have no idea. We don't even know what kind of parametric model or non-parametric model look like. And so the way is still try to understand what is the latent space. Can we capture the latent information? So like this, yeah.
All right, so because of the time, I think we should cut it. And thank you very much again.